The crash came first. A sound so loud, so violent, it swallowed the whole mansion, whole crystal chandeliers trembling overhead, fine china rattling in its cabinet, the polished mahogany walls seeming to flinch. Then silence, the kind that follows a war. In the center of the grand dining room, a priceless blue and white porcelain vase lay destroyed. Shards scattered across the Persian rug like broken bones. White orchids floated in a spreading pool of water, slow and quiet, almost peaceful against the chaos surrounding them. She was on the floor. Her. The woman in the gold gown, sequins glittering even now, even sprawled across the carpet like something discarded, one perfectly manicured hand clutching the rug, the other pressed flat against her chest, as if checking whether her heart still beat. It did. Barely. And, standing over her, a maid. Black dress, white apron, braids pulled back so tight they didn't dare move. One hand raised flat, open, and absolute like a wall that no force on earth was getting through. Her feet were planted wide on that Persian rug. Her jaw was set in iron. Her eyes, those eyes were not angry. They were decided. Behind her, half hidden in her shadow, a young blonde girl sat frozen in her wheelchair, both hands pressed over her mouth, her blue cardigan trembling with every breath she couldn't release. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. And then the doors. The heavy mahogany double doors swung open, and Dennis Edwards walked through them in his sharp gray suit, phone still in hand, mid-sentence on a call he immediately forgot. He stopped. His face did something complicated. Shock. Disbelief. And beneath it all, a question he hadn't even formed the words for yet. The maid's raised hand didn't waver. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her voice came low, controlled. A sound built not from rage but from something far more dangerous. Absolute certainty. Never. Disrespect. Her. Again. Dennis looked at the woman on the floor. He looked at the shattered vase. He looked at his sister, trembling, tearful, alive, shielded behind the most immovable woman he had ever hired. 10 seconds to understand what he was looking at. One choice to make. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. 6 months earlier, nobody at the Edwards estate even knew her name. The first thing Rose Frith noticed about the Edwards estate was that it was too quiet for something so big. She stood at the iron gates on a gray Tuesday morning, her single rolling suitcase beside her, her good leather flats already catching a blister on her right heel. The driveway stretched ahead like a runway. The house at the end of it could have swallowed her entire apartment building back in Newark and still had room to spare. She picked up her suitcase and walked anyway. Rose Frith had not been raised to be impressed by square footage. She'd grown up in New Jersey's no-nonsense embrace third daughter of a woman who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry and still had hot food on the table by 7. She understood what real work looked like. Real work didn't care about marble floors or vaulted ceilings. Real work showed up on time, kept its head down, and did what needed doing. That was the plan. Head down, work hard, send money home. Done. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Alderton, a brittle, efficient woman who communicated mostly in clipboard checks and disapproving silences, assigned Rose to the formal dining hall, polish the silver, press the linens, keep the table set to perfection for a billionaire who ate most of his meals alone at his office desk 40 minutes away. Easy enough. Rose had the dining room gleaming by noon on her first day. It was on her way out, cart rattling behind her, polish rag tucked in her apron, that she turned the corner near the east sitting room and nearly collided with a wheelchair. The girl in it looked up at her with eyes like a startled deer. Pale blue cardigan, small white socks, blonde hair falling loose around a face that was far too young to carry the kind of quiet it was carrying. She didn't speak. She just looked. Rose looked back. "You all right, baby?" The New Jersey in her never waited for permission. The girl Lily, Rose would learn. Dennis's sister, Mrs. Alderton, would say it like a footnote, gave the smallest, most careful nod in the world. Good. Rose reached out and gently straightened the small potted plant on the windowsill beside the girl's chair, the one someone had clearly nudged just out of her reach. Somebody ought to put that back where you can see it. Lily's eyes tracked the plant, then tracked back to Rose. Something in them shifted. Not much, barely the width of a breath, but Rose caught it. She was good at catching things people thought were invisible. She went back to her cart, finished her rounds, clocked out at 5, and came back the next morning knowing, in the quiet, certain way she'd always known things, that her job in this house had nothing to do with silver polish. The weeks settled into a rhythm. Rose maintained her dining hall with the kind of precision that made Mrs. Alderton run out of complaints. But every spare moment found her gravitating toward the east wing toward Lily. She would wheel her to the window on sunny mornings without being asked. She learned which television programs made Lily's shoulders drop with something close to ease, and which ones she tolerated only out of politeness. She learned that Lily liked her tea with exactly 1.5 sugars, that she flinched at loud doors, and that when something made her genuinely happy, truly, quietly happy, she didn't smile with her mouth. She smiled with the very corners of her eyes. Rose started angling her work cart past the east wing twice a day instead of once. Nobody told her to. Nobody needed to. The house was enormous, and cold, and full of expensive things that did nothing to warm it. But in the small radius around Lily's wheelchair, Rose built something steady, something safe. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a plant put back within reach, a blanket laid across tired legs without comment, a presence that said, "Without words, I see you. I'm here. Nothing's getting past me." Dennis Edwards she saw rarely, and only in passing, a tall figure in a tailored suit moving fast through his own hallways, phone pressed to his ear. The weight of a billion-dollar empire visible in the set of his shoulders. He was not a cruel man. She could see that. He was simply a man who had buried himself so deep in his work that he hadn't noticed how lonely his own house had become. He would stop sometimes, briefly, near Lily's doorway. Look in. Something complicated would move across his face. Guilt, threaded through grief. The expression of a man who blamed himself for an accident he hadn't been present to stop, and then his phone would ring. Or his assistant would appear, and he would be gone again. Rose watched this and said nothing. It wasn't her place. Not yet. The peace lasted exactly 11 weeks. It ended on a Thursday evening, just after 6, when a black car with tinted windows rolled up the estate's long driveway, and a woman stepped out of it like she was arriving at a premiere. Rose was crossing the entrance hall with a stack of fresh linens when the front doors opened. She smelled the perfume first. Then she saw her. Gold. Everything gold. The gown caught the entryway light and threw it back in every direction, demanding attention the way only things with nothing real to offer ever do. Her hair fell in perfect waves. Her heels added 4 inches she didn't need. She moved through the doorway with the practiced ease of a woman who had never once in her life doubted her own welcome. Dennis. Her voice was warm honey poured over something sharp. She crossed straight to him. He'd appeared from his study, visibly surprised, and took both his hands in hers. "I know I should have called. I know. But I needed to see you." Rose stood with her linens and watched. Dennis Edwards, a man who had reportedly negotiated a $40 million acquisition without blinking, looked momentarily like a man who had forgotten how to form a sentence. "Vanessa," he said it carefully. "This isn't— I won't stay long," she said quickly, already smiling, already steering. "I just missed this place. I missed you. Can't we just talk?" He looked uncertain. That was the crack. And Vanessa Rose could see it happening in real time, slid right through it. Mrs. Alderton materialized from somewhere and offered refreshments with the obedient efficiency of someone who recognized money when it walked through a door. Dennis guided Vanessa toward the sitting room. The doors closed. Rose stood in the entrance hall a moment longer than she needed to. Then she finished delivering her linens, returned her cart to the supply room, and went to check on Lily. Lily already knew. Rose could tell from the way she sat too still, hands folded too carefully in her lap, eyes fixed on the middle distance. There was a quality to her stillness that Rose had not seen since her first week in the house. Something braced, something that remembered. "Hey!" Rose sat on the small footstool beside her. "Look at me." Lily looked. "I'm right here," Rose said. "Simple. Certain. Nothing's changed." Lily held her gaze for a long moment. Then she gave that smallest of nods. Rose stayed until the girl's shoulders finally, slowly, came down from around her ears. Vanessa didn't leave. That was the first problem. The talk became dinner. The dinner became a standing invitation. Within a week, she had a guest room on the second floor and a seat at a table that had somehow, without anyone formally deciding it, become hers. Dennis seemed both aware and unaware of how it had happened. He would catch himself looking confused by her presence, and then she would laugh at something he said or touch his arm in just the right way, and the confusion would dissolve before it fully formed. Rose watched all of it. She watched the way Vanessa performed herself differently in different rooms, radiant and magnetic in Dennis's orbit, brittle and calculating the moment his back turned. In front of Dennis, Vanessa was sweetness itself with Lily. She would crouch beside the wheelchair, careful not to crease her dress, and speak in a soft, concerned voice about how brave Lily was, how inspiring. Dennis would watch with something that looked like relief. The moment he left the room, the temperature dropped. It was the eyes first. They flattened. The warmth switched off the way you switch off a lamp completely, without transition. Rose was polishing the sideboard in the dining room one afternoon when Vanessa guided Lily's wheelchair to the window, seemingly to show her the garden, and then, casually, inevitably, left it there. Several feet from where Lily had been. Several feet from her book, her tea, everything within her orbit. Lily said nothing. She never said anything. Rose set down her polished cloth, crossed the room, and wheeled Lily back without comment. She met Vanessa's eyes briefly. Vanessa smiled at her. The smile of a woman absolutely certain of her own untouchability. Rose smiled back. The smile of a woman who had grown up in Newark and had never once been intimidated by a pretty face. She started paying closer attention after that. She noticed the way Vanessa would compliment Lily's cardigan in front of Dennis, and then, 30 seconds later, when Dennis stepped away, lean in close to the girl's ear. Rose couldn't always hear the words, but she could read Lily's body the way it folded inward, the way her hands gripped her wheels, the way she stared at the floor afterward for long, hollow minutes. She started memorizing the details, timestamps, locations, exactly which seat Vanessa always chose, always angled toward the door, always with a clear view of whoever was coming and going. She noted how Vanessa made a point of befriending the junior staff, learning their names, bringing them small gifts, building a soft army of people who thought well of her. She noted, too, how Vanessa always seemed to know which members of the security team were on shift, how she smiled at them a beat longer than necessary, how they in turn never questioned her arrivals or departures. Something was being traded. Rose wasn't certain what yet, but she filed it away with everything else. Rose took no gifts. She needed no softening. On a Tuesday morning, she caught Dennis between meetings in the hallway outside his study. He was alone for once, jacket off, reading something on his phone. She knew she had perhaps 90 seconds before the world reclaimed him. "Mr. Edwards," she kept her voice level, professional. "I need to speak with you about Miss Vanessa." He looked up, attentive enough. "I've observed some behavior I think you should be aware of, toward Miss Lily. When you're not in the room." Something crossed his face, not dismissal, not yet, but the beginning of the particular discomfort men feel when a problem they'd rather not see insists on being seen. "What kind of behavior?" Rose told him, calmly, specifically. The moved wheelchair, the whispered words, the way Lily folded herself small in Vanessa's presence. She told him about the security staff, the long smiles, the small gifts, the way access to the house seemed frictionless for a woman who should have been stopped at the gate. He listened. She could see him actually listening, and then she could see, in real time, the moment Vanessa's voice reached them from the sitting room below. Bright and warm and laughing at something, the sound floating up the staircase like a song. His eyes drifted toward the sound, just briefly, but she caught it. Rose. He said her name with the careful tone of a man choosing his next words. I appreciate you bringing this to me. I do, but Vanessa can be a lot. I know that. She's still finding her footing here again. Sir, Lily doesn't communicate easily. He said it gently, like he was explaining something she hadn't considered. It can be easy to misread her reactions. Rose looked at him for a moment. Steady, quiet. With respect, Mr. Edwards, she said. I have spent 6 months learning how Miss Lily communicates. I am not misreading her. The 90 seconds were up. His phone rang. His face shifted back into the expression it wore for the rest of the world, decisive, unavailable. I'll keep an eye on things, he said, and walked back into his study. She stood in the hallway. She had expected it, which didn't make it land any softer. What she hadn't expected was Vanessa. She turned to find her standing at the far end of the corridor, one hand on the banister, gold bracelet catching the light, expression arranged into something that looked almost like concern. Is everything all right? Vanessa asked. The warmth was back on, full wattage. Fine, Rose said. I hope I haven't caused any confusion. She descended the last 2 steps slowly. I know it must be strange, me being back. I imagine the staff has all sorts of theories. She tilted her head. It's only natural for people to feel territorial. Rose held her gaze. I'm not territorial, Miss Vanessa. I'm observant. Vanessa smiled. Of course you are. A pause, deliberate and light. You're very dedicated to this family. Dennis mentioned it. It's sweet. She moved past Rose with a sweep of perfume and clicked down the hallway. Rose watched her go. By dinner that evening, Mrs. Alderton called Rose aside to inform her with all the warmth of a tax notice that Mr. Edwards had requested the staff maintain a more appropriate professional distance from family guests. No unsolicited opinions, no unnecessary engagement. Rose thanked her, returned to her dining hall, polished silver that was already perfectly polished. And she started angling the small security camera in the corner of the dining room, the one that had always pointed at the door 2 inches to the left, just enough to capture the full width of the room. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of Vanessa moving through the house like she owned it. 3 weeks of Dennis half present, half buried in his work, trusting that the quiet meant peace. 3 weeks of Rose watching and cataloging and saying nothing, because she had learned the hard way that words without evidence were just noise. Then Wednesday came, and Dennis left for a business meeting across the city. By 9:15, Vanessa had dismissed the junior housekeeping staff from the East Wing something about needing quiet for a phone call. Rose noted the specific security guard on duty at the east entrance. The one Vanessa always greeted by name, the one who'd received a bottle of whiskey the week before, delivered with a bright smile and no particular occasion. He didn't ask questions when Vanessa moved through his post unchecked. He never did. By 9:30, the entrance hall was still. By 9:45, the mansion had the particular silence of a house that knew something was wrong and couldn't say so. Rose was in the dining room when she heard the wheels. Lily's chair, moving fast, not self-propelled, but pushed, hard and purposeful. She set down her cloth. The dining room doors opened, and Vanessa came through them, one hand gripping the handles of Lily's wheelchair, her gold bracelet glinting, her face wearing a smile that had run completely out of warmth. She stopped in the center of the room. Lily's hands were white-knuckled on her wheels. Her eyes found Rose immediately quick, desperate, the seeking look of someone who has just spotted the only solid ground in a flooding room. Vanessa either didn't notice or didn't care. You're going to tell him, Vanessa said to Lily. Conversational, pleasant, the voice she used when she wanted something wrapped in a ribbon. At dinner tonight, you're going to tell Dennis that you're happy, that you want me here, that you think it's a good idea. She tilted her head. You're going to do that for me, aren't you, sweetheart?" Lily said nothing. The smile thinned. "Lily, lower now. I have been very patient with you, very kind. I have been nothing but lovely in this house, and you sit there and you look at me like that." She released the handles and crouched in front of the chair, one hand closing around the armrest. "I was here before you needed that chair. I will be here long after everyone has forgotten why you're in it. So you are going to smile tonight, and you are going to help me. And if you don't—" She gripped the armrest and tilted. Just slightly. Just enough. Lily's breath left her in a sharp, silent gasp, both hands slamming to the wheels. Rose was already moving. She crossed the room in 4 steps. Her hand closed around Vanessa's wrist, not gentle, not ceremonial, and pulled her back from the chair with a force that sent Vanessa stumbling sideways into the display pedestal behind her. The crash was deafening. The blue and white vase hit the floor and exploded. Water. Porcelain. White orchids scattering across the Persian rug like an accusation. Vanessa went down with it, gold sequins catching the chandelier light, even sprawled on the floor, one hand clutching the carpet, the other pressed to her chest. Rose stepped between them. She planted her feet wide on that Persian rug. She raised her hand flat, open, final. And the doors swung open. Dennis Edwards stood in the frame, jacket still on, phone in hand. The meeting across town apparently cut short. He looked at the vase. He looked at Vanessa on the floor. He looked at Lily, trembling and tearful, hands pressed over her mouth. He looked at Rose. Rose's hand didn't move. Her voice came low and certain and absolute. "Never disrespect her again." The room held its breath. If Rose and Lily's story has you gripping your seat, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, because what comes next is going to shake this entire household to its foundation. Comment below, Team Rose, who never backs down, or Team Dennis, who almost looked the other way. Don't miss what happens next. Justice has been served, but this family's healing is only just beginning. Nobody moved. The chandelier above them swayed almost imperceptibly, still trembling from the impact, throwing fractured light across the wreckage on the floor. Porcelain, orchids, water spreading slow and dark into the Persian rug. And Vanessa, glittering in the middle of all of it, beginning to understand that the room had shifted in a way she hadn't scripted. Then she started to cry. It was impressive, Rose had to admit. The way the tears arrived, not gradually, not with any of the ugly mechanics of genuine grief, but fully formed, perfectly timed. Vanessa pressed her hand to her mouth. Her shoulders curved inward. She looked up at Dennis from the floor with an expression so precisely calibrated to vulnerability that Rose almost admired the engineering of it. "Dennis." Her voice broke on the single syllable. "She attacked me." Dennis didn't move from the doorway. His face was doing the complicated thing again, processing too many inputs at once, trying to find the version of this scene that made sense. "She came at me out of nowhere." Vanessa's voice climbed, gaining momentum. "I was talking to Lily. I was just talking to her and this woman." She gestured at Rose, the gesture trembling, theatrical. "She grabbed me. She could have seriously hurt me." "Dennis, look at this." She extended her wrist, turning it over. A faint red mark. Rose's grip, still visible. Dennis looked at it. Then he looked at Rose. "Is that true?" Quiet. Controlled. The voice of a man who had not yet decided what he believed. Rose lowered her hand. She didn't lower her eyes. "Yes," she said. I pulled her away from Miss Lily's chair. "She's lying." "I'm not." Rose kept her voice even. Factual. Quieter than the noise around her, steadier than the ground beneath it. Miss Vanessa had both hands on the wheelchair. She tilted it. Miss Lily was terrified. I intervened. "That is not what happened." Vanessa was on her feet now, something animal moving beneath the performance. A flash of the real thing, quick and cold, before the grief mask resettled. I was trying to help her. I leaned down to speak to Lily, and this woman puts her hands on me like I'm some kind of criminal in your home. "You are a criminal in this home," Rose said. Simple. Factual. The room went very still. Vanessa's eyes found hers. The tears were still there, but something behind them had gone sharp and flat and dangerous. Dennis stepped fully into the room. He looked at Lily, who had not moved, who sat with both hands still pressed over her mouth, her eyes tracking every face in the room like a child watching a fire decide which direction to burn. "Lily." His voice softened. He crouched in front of her wheelchair the way Rose had seen him do in doorways when he thought no one was looking. In those brief, unguarded moments the world kept interrupting. "Can you tell me what happened?" Lily looked at him. She looked at Vanessa. She looked at Rose. And then, like a woman stepping off a ledge she'd been standing on for a very long time, she looked back at her brother and shook her head. Not a confused shake. Not an uncertain one. A deliberate one. Clear and small and absolute. Vanessa let out a breath, something between a laugh and a scoff. "She's confused. She's traumatized. You know how she gets." "Don't," Dennis said it quietly. He stood back up. Rose watched the word land. It was only one syllable, but it contained something new, the first fracture, slight and hairline, in the wall Vanessa had spent weeks building around him. Vanessa felt it too. Rose could see her recalibrate, the tears returning, the shoulders dropping again. "Dennis, I love this family. I love Lily. I would never—" "I'd like everyone to give me a moment," Dennis said. He wasn't looking at Vanessa when he said it. He was looking at the room. He called Rose back in 3 minutes later. Alone. Vanessa had been guided not entirely willingly to the sitting room by Mrs. Alderton, who had materialized with the efficient instincts of a woman who'd managed crises in wealthy households for 30 years. Lily remained. She hadn't been moved, and hadn't moved herself. She sat at the edge of the room near the window, her hands now folded in her lap, watching her brother with an expression that was more awake, more present, than Rose had seen in months. Dennis stood at the head of the dining table, both hands flat on the surface. He looked like a man doing math he didn't like the answer to. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." Rose told him. She started where it started, the moved wheelchair, the first week, the whispered words she couldn't always hear but could always read on Lily's body afterward. The way Vanessa cleared rooms, dismissed staff, moved through security checkpoints that should have slowed her down. She told him about the guard on the east entrance, the whiskey, the easy access, the pattern of it. She told him about the conversation in the hallway, about Mrs. Alderton's visit that evening. She told him every detail she had catalogued in the weeks since Vanessa arrived, and she told it the way she cleaned silver methodically, completely, without embellishment. When she finished, Dennis was quiet for a long time. "Why didn't you come to me again?" he said. He stopped. "After you didn't believe me the first time?" He had the grace to absorb that without flinching. "Yes, because I knew the next time I came to you," Rose said. "I needed you to see it, not just hear it." He looked at her carefully. "And did I?" She said nothing. Let the room answer for her. The shattered vase, the water still spreading into the rug, the absence of a woman who was currently in the sitting room preparing her next move. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down heavily. And then, a sound came from the corner of the room. Small, strangled, like something that had been held under water for a very long time and was finally, painfully, fighting its way to the surface. They both turned. Lily's hands were at her face again, but differently this time, not covering her mouth in terror but pressed against her cheeks, her eyes red and full and spilling over. Her shoulders were shaking. And from somewhere behind all that careful silence she had built around herself like a fortress wall, something was breaking through. The room went absolutely still, because Lily Edwards had not spoken not one word, not in this house, not to anyone in over a year. The word came out cracked, barely audible, the voice of someone who had not trusted it in a very long time, and was trusting it now because the alternative, staying silent while the wrong person walked free, was finally worse than the fear. Dennis was across the room before the second syllable. "Lily." He knelt in front of her. Hey, I'm here. Take your time. She knew. Lily's voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse and thick with everything she'd swallowed. Vanessa. She knew she kept saying, she said, if I told you she'd... add, she couldn't finish. The sentence dissolved. But her eyes, red and fierce and terrified, found her brothers and held them. The silence that followed was enormous. Dennis's face underwent something Rose had no word for. Not just understanding, something older and more devastating than understanding. The look of a man realizing that a wound he thought had healed had been kept open deliberately, by design, by someone he had let back into his house and his life and his trust. He took both of Lily's hands in his. I've got you, he said, low and certain, the same frequency as a promise. Lily nodded. She was still crying, but something in her posture had changed, some long-held bracing, some perpetual readiness for impact, beginning, just slightly, to release. Rose stood by the wall and said nothing, because nothing needed saying. Dennis stood up. He looked at the corner of the room at the small, discreet camera angled toward the dining area, and something shifted in his expression. That camera, he said. What does it cover? The full width of the room, Rose said. As of about 3 weeks ago. He looked at her. She looked back. Something almost like a complicated smile moved across his face and disappeared. He pulled out his phone and made a call short, clipped, to his head of building security. 2 minutes later, he had a laptop open on the dining table and was pulling the morning's footage. Rose sat across from him. Lily wheeled herself to the table's edge without being asked and positioned herself where she could see the screen. The three of them watched in silence. The timestamp read 9:47. The dining room, empty and still. Then the doors opening. Vanessa, moving fast, both hands on Lily's wheelchair handles, pushing her inside with the casual ownership of someone who had long since stopped performing in rooms she believed were unwatched. They watched Vanessa position herself in front of the chair. They watched her crouch. They couldn't hear the words, the room's audio was limited, but they could see Lily's body. The way it pressed back against the chair, the way her hands found the wheels, the way her face changed. They watched Vanessa grip the armrest, tilt. Dennis made a sound low in his throat. Not anger yet, something rawer than anger, something that preceded it. They watched Rose come through the side door. 4 steps. The grip, the pull, the stumble, the pedestal, the vase, all of it captured with the impartial honesty of a machine that had no reason to lie. Dennis stopped the footage. He sat very still for a moment. Then he reached forward to close the laptop and paused. On the frozen frame Vanessa mid-fall, one hand flung out toward the pedestal, something caught Rose's eye. Small. On the floor near Vanessa's outstretched hand, separated from her in the impact. It must have fallen from her clutch when she went down. Wait. Rose leaned forward. Go back. 15 seconds. Dennis scrolled back. Let it play. There in the moment Vanessa hit the floor. Something small skittered away from her across the Persian rug. Pause it. He paused it. Rose stood and walked to the spot on the rug where the object had landed in the footage. She looked down. It was still there, partially hidden under the edge of the fallen vase's base. Small. Silver. A custom keychain. A distinctive double-ring design with a small blue enamel charm at its center. Rose had seen it before. Not on Vanessa. Not in this house. She had seen it in a description. 6 months earlier, before she took this job, she had sat in a waiting room while the agency processed her paperwork. She'd been half reading a newspaper over the shoulder of the man beside her, a habit she'd picked up from her mother, who believed information was never wasted. A brief article. An unsolved hit-and-run. A young woman left in the road, a car that never stopped, and a single piece of evidence recovered at the scene. A custom keychain that had apparently fallen from the vehicle's open window. The article described it in detail. Double ring. Blue enamel center. Never traced. Case never closed. She had arrived at this house 6 days later, and met a girl in a wheelchair named Lily Edwards. She had never made the connection. Lily had not spoken. There had been no photograph in the article, no name she'd retained, nothing to bridge two separate moments across 6 months of a new life. Until now. Until a gold clutch hit the floor at the wrong angle, and a small silver object skittered across a Persian rug and landed exactly where a camera had been pointed 3 weeks earlier by a woman who had learned to trust her instincts. Rose straightened up slowly. She turned to face Dennis. He was already watching her. He had seen the calculation move across her face and was waiting, completely still, for what came next. She pointed at the screen, at the keychain. "That charm," she said carefully. "The double ring with the blue enamel center." She paused. There was an article about an unsolved hit and run. The police found a keychain at the scene described exactly like that one. She held his gaze. "I need you to look up the evidence description from Miss Lily's case." The color left Dennis Edwards's face. Not slowly, all at once. He knew. She could see that he already knew, or that some part of him, the part that had never fully accepted the accident as random, had known for longer than he'd allowed himself to admit. He had simply needed someone to show him where to look. He picked up his phone. His hands were steady. Rose had expected them to shake. They didn't. That told her something about the kind of man he was, the kind who went cold and precise when the world gave him every reason to fall apart. He made 2 calls. She heard the words attorney and detective, and immediately. And then he set the phone down and looked at the frozen image on the screen for a long, silent moment. Then he looked at Lily. Lily was staring at the keychain on the rug. Her face had gone very pale, and very still, and very, very old. Like someone who had always suspected a thing and had just been handed the proof they'd spent 2 years trying not to need. "Lily." His voice was rough now, the steadiness wearing thin at the edges. "Did you know?" She shook her head. A small, honest shake. But she was still looking at the keychain. And Rose understood then that Lily had known something, had felt something, had sensed something in the way Vanessa looked at her when no one else was watching, and had filed it away in the same place she filed everything too large and too dangerous to carry openly. Rose reached down and picked up the keychain carefully, wrapping it in the clean cloth from her apron pocket without touching it directly. She placed it on the table in front of Dennis. He looked at it for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the sitting room. Rose didn't follow him in. She didn't need to. She could hear Vanessa's voice through the closed doors, first warm and explanatory, then climbing, then sharp as the warmth ran out and there was nothing left beneath it but the cold, ugly truth of what she was. She heard the precise moment Vanessa understood that the performance was over. The voice changed entirely, became something harder and more honest than anything she'd allowed in this house. Then it went very quiet. Then the doors opened. Dennis came back through them alone. His jacket was still on, his face was set. But his eyes held the particular expression of a man who has just looked directly at something he had refused to see for a very long time and has decided he will never look away from it again. He made one more call. The police arrived 35 minutes later, long enough for Dennis's attorney to arrive first, review the footage, examine the keychain, and place a second call of his own to the detective who had worked Lily's case 2 years prior and never closed it. The case that had never closed because one small piece of evidence had never found its match. Until now. Rose stood in the hallway with Lily beside her and watched 2 officers walk through the mahogany double doors and into the sitting room. She watched them come back out with Vanessa between them. No gold clutch now, no performance. The perfect waves disheveled, the warmth gone entirely, leaving behind something cold and brittle, and considerably smaller than it had always appeared. Vanessa looked at Rose as they passed. Rose looked back. She said nothing. She had already said the only thing that needed saying. The front doors closed. The estate went quiet, but differently than it had been quiet before. Not the hollow silence of a house holding its breath. Something cleaner, something with space in it now for something new. Dennis found her an hour later in the dining hall. She was on her knees, cleaning up the last of the water from the rug, cloth in hand, methodical as ever, as though the last several hours had been an interruption to the actual work rather than the most important work she had ever done. Rose. She sat back on her heels and looked up at him. He stood in the middle of his dining room, jacket off now, sleeves rolled up, looking less like a billionaire and more like a person, and he looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. "I owe you an apology," he said. "More than one. You owe me nothing, Mr. Edwards. I dismissed you." He said it plainly. Not a man performing accountability, but a man actually reckoning with it. "You came to me and told me what was happening in my own house, to my own sister, and I chose to believe it wasn't what you said it was because believing you meant I had made a serious mistake in judgment. And I let that matter more than Lily's safety." He paused. "That's unacceptable, and I'm sorry." Rose looked at him for a moment. "Yes," she said simply. "It is." He almost smiled at that. "You're not going to make this easy for me. Easy isn't what you need." "No." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced an envelope, thick, formal. He set it on the table beside her cleaning supplies. "I'd like to offer you a new contract. Not as a dining hall attendant." He met her eyes. "As head of household care. Lily's primary guardian and advocate, with full authority over her care, her schedule, and the staff who support her. Your own suite in the East Wing. Compensation to match." He paused. "And my guarantee that your word in this house carries the same weight as mine." Rose looked at the envelope. She thought about Newark, about her mother working double shifts, about what steady work and real money meant to a family that had spent its life counting carefully. She thought about Lily, about tea with exactly 1.5 sugars, about a smile that lived only in the corners of her eyes. She thought about the way Lily had looked at her across the flooding room when Vanessa's hands were on the chair. The seeking look of someone who has just spotted the only solid ground. She picked up the envelope. "One condition," she said. Dennis waited. "The camera stays angled where I put it." This time he did smile. Small and real and without any performance in it at all. "Done," he said. That evening, Rose wheeled Lily to the window in the east sitting room, the one with the view of the garden that caught the last of the day's light. She put the kettle on. 1.5 sugars. She set the small potted plant back on the sill, right where Lily could reach it. The same place it had always belonged. The same place this whole thing had quietly started, 6 months and a lifetime ago. Lily sat with her tea and watched the garden go golden in the falling light. After a while, she looked at Rose. And for the first time in 6 months, possibly longer, possibly much longer than that, the smile moved all the way from the corners of her eyes to her mouth. Rose sat down beside her. Outside, the Edwards estate was quiet, but not hollow anymore. Not cold. For the first time, it felt something like a home. Can Dennis tell the difference between the woman who protected his sister and the truth about the woman who nearly destroyed her? And what other dark secrets has Vanessa buried in the 2 years she spent watching this family from the outside? Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss what happens next. This story is about to get even more twisted. Drop a comment. Do you think Rose and Lily's bond is strong enough to heal everything this house has been through? Like this video if you're obsessed with this story of loyalty, justice, and a maid who refused to look the other way. The next chapter drops soon, and trust me, you are not ready for what Vanessa left behind. Because a woman that calculated never works alone. See you in the next one. If Rose is ready for what's coming,